I'm Mr. MegaManFan. That is Tango rubbing his face on one of my storage containers. And this is Sol-Deace, or depending on your region, Sol-Feace for Sega Genesis. Yeah, Tango wants to rub his face all over the cartridge too. I think a few teeth marks won't hurt this thing because it's already pretty rough. You can see a price sticker was torn off the label. There's scratches all over it. It's a loose cartridge. It's all I've got, but it's not a super common game, so I'm happy to have it in any form, including as busted up looking as this one is. So let's pop it in the old Analog Mega SG and see what Nintendo don't. Now at the start, you're going to notice a moire pattern, and I apologize for that, but it seems to go away once I actually get into the physical gameplay. Also, I've got this scaled up a little too big because I noticed that the score was off the screen and couldn't even be read. So I'll pause it here in a second when that happens and switch it from 5x to 4.5x. Thankfully, with the 8-bit do, however you pronounce it, controller that they made to go with the Analog Mega SG, it's easy to hit the menu button and go right into the settings and change stuff on the fly. So that's something Analog does that Sega Genesis don't. But getting back to Sol-Deace, let me tell you a little more about this game as this pretentious text scrolls up the screen. This was originally a horizontal scrolling shooter developed by Wolf Team and published for the Sharp X68000. So you already know just from that, if you're a video game collector, that it's rare, coveted, and highly expensive if you want the original version. But fortunately for everybody else, the Sega CD and Sega Genesis versions that followed renamed it Sol-Deace and made it more accessible to a wide range of people. Although when I say more accessible, I should note that as of the recording of this video, loose copies go for $33, complete copies go for $75, and it just gets worse from there. So, like I said, I'm kind of happy to have this game in any condition. Now then, the player takes control of the titular starship, and it must prevent a malfunctioning supercomputer from enslaving all of mankind. The gameplay involves shooting down enemies, avoiding projectiles, collecting power capsules, and liberating the galaxy. Well, not actually that part. I just added that for dramatic effect. Anyway, the game's soundtrack was composed by Motoi Sakuraba, who would later work on the Tales series for Namco. Alongside Micronet's Heavy Nova, it was one of the first launch titles for Sega CD in Japan and was made a console pack-in North America. So that version might actually be more common than the cartridge that I own, which would probably explain why it's fetching a fair price on the market these days. Sol-Feace was met with mixed reviews, who praised its fast action graphics and soundtrack, but criticized its lack of originality and subpar quality compared to other games on the market. Sunsoft now owns the rights to Sol-Feace after their acquisition of Telenet Japan in 2009. There you go. And when they talk about how it pales in comparison to other side-scrolling shooters, I can kind of see where they're coming from, because right away it feels like a rip-off of Gradius. Now, maybe all things that are horizontally scrolling shooters end up feeling like Gradius, but this one in particular really feels that way, with the capsules that you pick up feeling just like you're picking up capsules in Gradius. The enemies with their spread shots spreading out just like Gradius. The parallax with the stars in the background scrolling underneath you as you're scrolling towards your enemies. There's so many things that make it similar and yet somehow inferior at the same time. Like, for example, if this was Gradius, you'd be able to have shields circling around your ship to protect it, and I've never found a way to pick those up in Sol-Deace. If this was Gradius, you'd be able to choose what you get when you get the capsule, because you could stack up the capsules until you get the item you want, and you can't do that with Sol-Deace. I could go on comparing the two games, but that's probably unfair to Sol-Deace. So let me tell you a little more about this game instead of about that game. The game's original release date was November 22nd, 1990, which makes this almost a 30-year-old game. And here's a little bit of the reception it received at the time when it first came out. Computer and Video Games magazine criticized the gameplay for lacking originality, unfavorably comparing it to such games as Hellfire and Gnog. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I've never heard of Gnog. Wizard stated it offered nothing new to the shoot-'em-up genre. Honestly, I think that's pretty accurate. Retro Gamer said it was below par for the console, simply the Genesis version with a new CD soundtrack tacked on, so they were reviewing the Sega CD version. GamePro wrote the Genesis release, the power items weren't as impressive as those in Thunder Force 3, and they also disliked the game's short length. I'd have to play Thunder Force 3 a little more to be sure, but I feel from having played it not too long ago, they're probably right about that. None of these reviews seem to be off the mark to me. In a more positive light, Electronic Games called the Sega CD conversion a solid side-scrolling shooter. I'll try saying that 3 times fast. GamePro liked the Sega Genesis detailed visuals and pumping soundtrack. They also wrote the game could be a contender for a Shoot 'em Up award had one existed in the magazine. Now, as for the developer Telenet Japan, they have a pretty interesting history in their own right. The company was also known as Nippon Telenet, best known for the Valis series, as well as its Wolf Team, Lasersoft, and Riot divisions, the former of which created Tales of Phantasia. The company's North American subsidiary, Renovation Products, was eventually acquired by Sega. The company closed its stores on October 25th, 2007. The Riot division came into existence in 1991 when Telenet Japan was expanding in the country. However, because Telenet was starting to lose sales in 1993, the company went through extensive restructuring, which resulted in the closing of a few subsidiaries. Some staff stayed, some were transferred to Wolf Team, and several key developers of PC Engine games left Riot to found MediaVision and work on a new role-playing game franchise, Wild Arms. Here's some of the games they developed for Mega Drive/Genesis. Beast Wrestler, Gyres, Tracia, Valis 3, XZR. They've got quite a history there on that system. They developed one Nintendo 64 game, Parlor Pro Pachinko, which I don't think makes too much of a standout title because I feel like there are just tons of Pachinko games on PC Engine and Japanese consoles in general, so having another one doesn't really add anything. They have some Super Famicom and Super NES games, Ace Attorney, Dark Kingdom, Super Valis 4, and they've also got some MSX games, Saw Z Re, Albatross Tournament Golf, American Truck, Digital Devil Monogatari, Megami Tensei. So, yeah, they've got quite the varied roster of games. I think Saramoto would probably have quite a few of these games in his collection because they did a whole lot of stuff on PC Engine and TurboGrafx. Columns, Cosmic Fantasy, Golden Axe, Lady Alert, Puzzle Boy, Tenshino Uda, Valis, Valis 2, Valis 3, Valis 4, Valis Collection. Yeah, Valis is definitely their signature franchise out of all the different things they do. So, it's fortunate for me that this one is in fact a Genesis exclusive because most of those Valis games are on multiple consoles in multiple places. But that's simply not the case with Sol-Deace/Sol-Feace. It came out on X68000, Sega CD, and Sega Genesis. That's it. So I'm trying to get good, as they say, and get these patterns down as I played through it multiple times for this Genesis Does video. And I feel like I'm getting a little less garbage with each playthrough, but that's just rote memorization, not necessarily my skill increasing. Although I do find one of the interesting things is that the debris floating to you, you can't destroy it, but if you shoot it enough times, it starts scrolling in the other direction. And for whatever reason, shooting the debris also adds to your score total, although it does so in very weird increments. It seems to add 9 points at a time. So I don't know what's up with that scoring system, but it works for Sol-Deace, so at least it makes them different in that respect compared to other shooters. And there I'm showing I'm garbage again by getting destroyed just as I said I was trying to get better. Oh well, that's how it goes sometimes. So, looking at price charting again for just a moment, it seems that back in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, when I probably would have first acquired this, it was going for around $5 to $10 loose. It looks like it peaked in 2018 at $60 loose and has come significantly down since then to about half of that price, between $25 and $30 as of the recording of this video. So, like what Pat the NES Punk and Ian were saying on the CU podcast the other day, it feels like we might have hit that high water mark in retro gaming and started to come back down to earth. I believe Pat was using the example of Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, a game which was going for multiple hundreds of dollars a few years ago, sometimes close to $1,000, and now you can find it for between $300 and $500, which is still a ludicrous amount, but it's not as ludicrous. So perhaps that is a sign that people are getting fed up with these inflated prices. I'm getting fed up with the fact that I got destroyed just as I beat the boss, and then I couldn't pick up the capsule because I got destroyed, and it jetted me to the next level. But at least I'm making some progress this time through in getting to the next mission. Break the enemy's arsenal. But since I've never played this stage before and have not memorized any part of it, I'm not too confident in my abilities to progress much further in the game on this particular video. So in conclusion, I'm going to say Sol-Deace is an interesting game, not necessarily one I would spend more than a few bucks on. I think $5 to $10 was actually the right price for it back in the day. I feel like 60 is way too much. 30, you have to be a hardcore collector. Otherwise, you should probably emulate it. This is not one of the signature shoot-em-ups of the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, but it's fun to go for a test drive with it and have a little shooting action. As always, thanks for watching.